Well, they found that discovery of the oldest Hebrew text within 500 years of the Exodus, over there in the Valley of Elah, where David slew Goliath. Of course, that was many years later when that happened. But this Hebrew text was written on a potsherd. Okay? Now, I ask you the question, what is so important about them finding this Hebrew text?
Does it prove that he's real?
Huh?
It proves that God's real.
To prove that the Hebrews existed back then. You know what the Arab world says? That the promise of Abraham was not to Jacob. It was not to it was not to Jacob at all. It wasn't to Isaac, but it was to Ishmael. And that the whole Jewish people, as we see it today, never existed, nor the nation of Israel never existed. They say the nation of Israel never existed. Now just think about that for a while. That all of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, is not accurate and not correct at all, and that it didn't exist, that it is a modern facade of the Hebrew people. That David never lived. That Solomon never lived. That the Exodus never happened. Okay? All of this, none of it ever happened. That Solomon's temple nor the tabernacle never stood on the mount there, the Temple Mount. It never happened.
But what is their proof? What is their proof?
So their proof, now, well, they've done everything they could do to destroy the archaeological sites and everything, and they say it never happened. And I showed you a film about that here 2 or 3 years ago, where they got up and said, this never happened. Nothing in history ever proves that Israel existed. You got to be in a constant state of denial to believe that. Now, this last week, they discovered this Hebrew text that's 3,000 years old, and the Arabs say the Hebrew didn't even have the language back then. They didn't even have any Hebrew language to write the Hebrew Bible with. Well, there is one that goes back.
Who published that news?
It was, well, wherever it is. Where is it right now? How far, where did it go? Is it over here? Well, let it pass it around now.
Honey, I haven't read it
Well,
yet.
you'll get to read it at home, sweetheart. Okay? Let the rest of the people see it. All right?
Right, I tell you that.
Not supposed to be glomming on that. That's supposed to be going around.
Where you in trouble?
You should keep it.
You know, they say I get in a lot of trouble, Jim.
Yeah, I
We should make
know.
some copies of this.
Anyway, as you pass it around, that is the oldest Hebrew text.
That was
Now, how old are the Dead Sea Scriptures? How old did the Dead Sea Scriptures go?
25.
They're not that old, are they?
2000. 25.
What?
225 or 2000 or something.
They're over 2,000 years old.
But they're not as old.
But this one predates them by 1,000 years. Now, in the Dead Seas, you know, the Qumran caves that's out there by the Dead Sea, okay? There was Essenes or Qumranians there that go back to somewhere around 800 BC. That's 800 years BC. So now that's nearly 3,000 years old, some of them. But we don't know how old those writings that they have there are. There were, what is the most prolific book that was written there? Come on, you guys have been in the classes. What's the book that was copied more than
Isaiah.
anything else?
Isaiah?
What?
Isaiah?
Well, the book of Isaiah, there's almost a complete Bible there of the Hebrew Old Testament.
Enoch.
The book of Enoch was the most prolific book that was copied there. Many, many copies of it. And someone found one about 1000 AD, and it ended up in Egypt. And somebody bought it, and that's what they called the Syrian paper, or the Damascus paper, or the Damascus letter, whatever you want to call it, because they had come from Syria, Damascus, Syria. Somebody had over there and discovered part, in 1000 AD, somebody had discovered part of the Dead Sea Scrolls already, and they took some of them off. And one of them ended up in Egypt. And then later on, you know, in the last century, in the mid-1900s, they found that Bedouin boy, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to say they found it, but the boy was throwing, he lost a goat up there, and he was throwing rocks in a cave, and he heard something breaking in there, and he went up there, and there was a whole bunch of jars. And they found the Dead Sea Scrolls in there, and they were basically, I think the whole Old Testament was there. But now to the Jews, or not to the Jews, but that was the Arab boy that discovered it, okay? He sure wasn't an Israelite, all right? He discovered them, and they found out. Now, the Jerusalem University, now they've done all this stuff, but they just say they're making this all up. The Arab world that says they're all making all this stuff up. Well, out here we have a potsherd that's discovered that's over 3,000 years old that gets almost back to the Exodus. Now, they had Hebrew writing back then. We know that now. All right, so there we are. And that's what we're studying in the Old Testament right now, is the law of Moses. Yes.
About a month ago, I think it was, in the Bakersfield, California, and they had a little article on the Dead Sea Scrolls. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see it.
They're going to be doing some kind of an infrared scanning on them, and then putting them online so that everybody can look
So you
at
can
it.
look at them.
Yeah.
Okay. I have
It's gonna-
seen
They
them.
said it's going to take like 3 to 5 years to
Yeah.
do all of them, but they're going to start doing that.
Well, they better hurry up.
I know, huh?
That's the one they've
We
done.
don't have that much time left.
Now, I have seen the Dead Sea Scrolls before they were ever. I've been to the Dead Seas. I've been to the caves there by the Qumran. I have seen the scriptorium that they uncovered where they wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of the ink wells with some of the old ink is still there. In the dead. Have you been there, Sister Andy? You've been over there. Yeah. Anyway, and then I went to Jerusalem where they had the scroll of Isaiah, and a lot of these I got to look at some of these things in what they call the cave of the scrolls. I think is what it was called back then. Brother X.
I was going to, this Bedouin boy found those scrolls. Who did he turn them over to?
They didn't turn them over to anybody. They sold them.
To a museum.
He took them, since it was leather, and took the scrolls to a shoemaker in Jerusalem, an Arab shoemaker, and sold the leather, and the guy took the leather scrolls and cut them out and put them in insoles and shoes. If you can imagine that. They had no respect for what they were at all. In the Tischendorf, when he went into to Sinai, or what they call St. Catherine's of Sinai. He went there, and this was in the 1800s. And the monks there were taking and using ancient scrolls to light their fires with. And he found out, he found in that place the Codex Sinaiticus, which was one. We have Sinaiticus, Alexandrius, and the Vaticanus. Those were 3 complete Bibles that were done in Greek in Alexandria, or when they ordered 50 complete Bibles made in the 300s by who's the guy that married the church in the States? Some of you guys can't think of his name right now. Constantine. When Constantine ordered 50 complete Bibles. Anyway, 3 of those Bibles are still in extant. The Vaticanus, the Alexandrinus, and the Sinaiticus, and he discovered it. And they had burned part of the pages in it already. If you can imagine that. Anyway, there's no telling how much stuff was out there. People used them in their, what they call their parlors in England and everything when they discovered a lot of this stuff. Well, let's go to the 18th chapter of Exodus. And any other questions before we got on? This last week, some of you got in a little bit late, but they discovered a part of the Hebrew text on a potsherd that's over 3,000 years old.
They was digging in a ruin, city's ruins.
Yeah, they're passing that around so you get to look at it. All right.
That's okay.
18th chapter. We finished the 17th chapter last week. And we're going to kind of skip over the 18th chapter a little bit. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. 18 and verse 1, 2, and 3. Are you there, Rebecca? 18, can you read that for me, please?
Verses what?
Verse 1, 18, verse 1, 2, and 3.
Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day.
No,
So-
that's not. Are you?
Genesis?
No, Exodus.
Oh, Exodus.
Exodus.
Oh, there.
Exodus 18. Exodus 18.
Ah, that's way wrong.
Exodus the 18th chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where Abraham, the Lord appeared to Abraham.
Okay. And Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel his people, that the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back, with her 2 sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land.
Okay. And this, by the way, was about BC 1500 when all this was taking place. Okay? All right? About 3,500 years ago. So the scroll that they found was almost contemporary with what's going on here. And some of the Dead Sea Scrolls go almost back this far. All right? They could. They don't know for sure. All right? Number 4 there, Rebecca.
And the name of the other was Eliezer.
Eliezer.
Eliezer. For he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh.
All right. And then we have, from here on, in the rest of the chapter, we have Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. He sees how everything's going on. Moses bows down, prostrates himself before Jethro, and they ask each other how they are. And then in verse 10, Brother Mike, verse number 10.
Of 18?
Yes.
Okay. So Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians.
Okay, now this is a quote of Jethro. Now who did Jethro, what did he use for the name of God there, Brother?
Jehovah.
Jehovah. So he knew who Jehovah was. The name Jehovah means what? He who shall become. All right. And verse number 11, Lori.
Now I know that the Lord is greater than all other gods, for he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly.
All right. Now he is greater than all other gods, all other Elohim. All right. Just all other gods, people that look upon and worship God. Now you make a god out of anything. All right. And they had been making gods out of anything, all kinds of images. And then what happened here in verse number 12, Lori?
Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law, in the presence of God.
All right, now the elders. It talks about the elders. These are the heads of the families. These are the paterfamilia in Latin, the fathers of the families, patria in Greek. All right, mekpatha in Hebrew. Fathers of the families. Okay, so they go and they have bread. But who offered the sacrifice? Jethro. Who was Jethro? Huh? All right, remember what Jethro's name meant? Preeminent. All right, he had 5 names, didn't he? He was the one that had 5 different names. Jethro, Jether, Ruel, Raguel, and Ru. All right? And what did his names mean? Do you remember what they meant? All right? Jethro and Jether basically means preeminent. Someone that's above. Okay? And how about Ruel? Ruel. All right? Ruel. El is God, isn't it? Okay? And Ragel, those Ruel and Ragel are close to the same name, and it means Jehovah is my friend. Our God is my friend. All right? So here we have this man. Now, he's been a priest of Midian for a long time. And evidently, he was worshiping the real God. And just so happens that God led Moses over there to Jethro's house. And he married one of his daughters. And they had children. All right? And so this guy has been evidently he is a patriarch, and he's leading his family in the right way. And when he comes there, Moses did not say, "You can't do this, Jethro. Don't you offer any sacrifices or anything out here." He just let him go ahead and do it, didn't he? Then what else happened with this man of God? Evidently, he was a priest of God in Midian, wasn't he? What's Midian mean? Remember what the word Midian means? Contention. Contention. Land of contention. There was a lot of fighting going on over there. So he allows him to do this. And then verse number 13, Brother Mike.
And it came about the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from the morning till the evening.
And number 14, Jeff.
When his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?"
All right. And then verse number 15, Sister Andino.
And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God."
All right. Number 16, Anna. Are you there over there, number 16? Exodus 18 and verse 16.
When a dispute arises, they come to me, and I am the one who settles the case between the quarreling parties. I inform the people of God's decrees and give them his instructions.
All right. Look at this. Now, he's telling what he's doing. Brother John, number 17.
So Moses' father-in-law said for him, "The thing that you do is not good."
All right. Brother Floyd.
You and the people with you will wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to perform it alone.
All right. He said, now he's giving Moses advice here. And what is Moses going to do with this advice? Say, go jump in the creek? I'm God's man. Huh?
He's going to receive the counsel.
He's going to receive this counsel. Brother David, are you there? Number 19.
19.
Mhm.
Now listen to me. I shall give you counsel, and God be with you. You be the people's representative before God, and you bring the disputes to God.
Number 20.
Then teach them the statutes and the laws, and make known to them the way in which they are to walk, and the work they are to do.
All right, number 21. This is very, very important. Number 21. Hernando.
Furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest gain, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and tens.
All right, now here we're going to have the 70 elders that was talking about. So Jethro was the one. Now this is about the nation of Israel. Now I wouldn't even have gone into this chapter because we could jump over this and get right into the next chapter and go on into the law and everything. But this is very important because this is what is going to rule Israel forever. These people would become known later as what? What would they be known? What? The Sanhedrin court. This is where it's established right here. This is where, how many of you knew that? I know Sister Andino knew that. All right, how many of you knew this is where the Sanhedrin court came from? Who condemned Jesus to death? The Sanhedrin court. What's it say here? And you shall select out of all the people able men who, what? Tremble before God. That's what it says. They tremble before God. They fear God. And men of truth. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a politician like this? We'd be in pretty good shape, wouldn't we? All right. Those who hate what? Dishonesty, covetousness, greed. What do we got out there? And gain, dishonest gain. And you shall place these over as leaders of thousands and hundreds and fifties and of tens. And then it says in verse number 22, Brother Rex?
Let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge.
All right? Every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge, so it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. This is where it started, right here. This is where the Sanhedrin court started. That's where it all began. And it began with Jethro. It ended up real bad. Who condemned Stephen to death in Acts the 7th chapter? The Sanhedrin court. Who voted with the Sanhedrin court there? Who was a judge? One of the judges on the Sanhedrin court that cast his ballot with them. Saul, which became Paul. All right? Later on, they would condemn him, wouldn't they? They could stone him to death a couple of times and beat him and everything else. Number 23. If you do this thing and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all these people also will go to the place in their place in peace. So Moses listened to his father-in-law and did all that he said, and Moses chose able men out of all of Israel and made them heads over the people, leaders of thousands, of hundreds, and they judged the people at all times. The difficult dispute they would bring to Moses, but every minor dispute they themselves would judge. And then Moses bade his father-in-law fare well, and he went his way into his own land. All right. Now here we go. 3 months later, we're going to arrive in the wilderness of Sinai. The wilderness of Sinai. Okay? Let's look at this. Verse number 1 now. We're going to let you start right out again, Rebecca.
In the 3rd month after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the same day they came to the wilderness of Sinai.
All right, the wilderness of Sinai. Look there, they came to the wilderness. You know what a wilderness is?
It's a desert.
Huh? That's a desert. Yeah, rainbow, desert. Hardly anything lives there. But they came to this place. Why do you think God took them into this desert? God was leading them, wasn't he? He was leading. Now, why did God lead them to this place? Now, Moses has been around here before. Remember the burning bush and all that kind of stuff? He'd been through the land of Midian and everything else, but now he leads them to the Mount Sinai, all right? And the word mount is hor in H-O-R in Hebrew. And when it says the mount, it is ha-hor. Ha is the, and hor is mountain. So you'll see later on it uses the name hor there as the mountain. That's the Hebrew word. Okay? Verse number 2. All right, verse number 2, Brother Mike.
When they set out from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. And there Israel camped in front of the mountain.
All right. Israel camped in front of the mountain. All right. And verse number 3, Dr. John.
And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings, and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice, and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine.
All right. Now this is very important right here. This is what we call God's elect. Okay? There is 2 groups of people in the Bible that are called the elect of God. Okay? One is Israel and the other is the church. Elect. What is the name for church in Spanish? Iglesia. What's the name for church in Greek?
Ecclesia.
Ecclesia, which means one's called out. All right? One's called out. So here we have the elect body. Now, I have talked to a lot of Jewish people and a lot of Arab people. I've had to try to get, these Arabs have tried to convert me a lot to the Muslim faith. All right, they've tried to convert me, and I've worked on them. And I have never made one convert from the Muslim world yet. That's one thing I haven't been able to touch. I've worked on them. But most of the Muslim people, when it comes to the Old Testament and Jehovah God, of course they call him Allah, don't they? Allah, and of course they've got about 300 or 400 names for him to adjectives that describe his beauty. Okay? But this is one thing that all of them have said to me. I will not worship a God that chooses a people over another.
Yeah, they claim they're the chosen people, don't they?
That's right. I will not worship a God. I don't want to have anything to do with a God that would choose one people over another. And yet, that's exactly what they say. And the whole, in a nutshell, is they want to bring in the whole world under the rule of Allah and Muhammad's statutes. All right? But here it is. God says very straight, very plainly, look at what it says. I will indeed, if you obey my voice and keep my covenant, that you shall be a very special possession. My special possession. Among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. All the earth is the Lord. But he is going to use Israel. He is going to use Israel as his nation. The only nation God ever owned is Israel. That's it. That's God's special name, special people. And yet the whole Muslim world won't even accept Israel. And even let's look at the supra-lapsarian Calvinistic standpoint of replacement theology. Okay, I mean that's a big word that I just used, but what did I say?
What did you say?
Replacement theology. What did Calvin teach? What did Luther teach? What brought on the Holocaust in Germany? Luther's teaching. Calvin and Luther, and of course it goes all the way back to Augustine, which was one of the fathers of the Catholic Church. Replacement theology is that God is finished with Israel, that he has washed his hands of them, and they will never be anything in his sight. But that's not what the Bible says. And they say that everything, every promise that pertained to Israel is to the church today. Israel still has a place in God's heart. That promise to Abraham was what kind of a covenant? What kind of covenant was? We're talking about different covenants. What is it?
Unconditional.
Unconditional covenant. It didn't have anything to do with them. And all on the promise of God. All right? All on the promises of God. So Moses called the elders of the people and set before them all these words which the Lord had commanded. And all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Verse number 8. And Moses brought back the words of the people to the Lord. Verse number 9, Floyd. 19 and verse 9, Floyd.
19 verse 9.
Yeah. Are you there?
I'll find it.
I'll get you
I
to...
have to turn a page to find it.
Okay.
And
Sometimes they pay...
the Lord said to Moses, Lo, I am coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe you forever.
All right. I speak with you and may also believe in you forever. And then what's the last part of the verse? Then Moses told the words of the Lord to the people. What name of God is it using there, Brother?
Jehovah.
Jehovah. This is Jehovah, he who shall become. Remember, this name is very important until we get the Ten Commandments. And then Israel, after that, they're not going to use this name Jehovah anymore. All right? Because they're afraid to use it in vain. Number 10, Brother Rex.
Then the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes.
All right, go baptize your garments. That's what he said. Go baptize your garments. All right, number 11, Lori.
And be ready by the third day, because on that day the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people.
All right, now let's look at this. There's some very important things here. Number 12, go on.
Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not go up the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death.
All right, what is this teaching? What is it teaching?
Holiness.
Reverence to God. Reverence to God. You need to reverence God. You need to fear God. Because His holiness is exact. Without an offering, without something covering you and your sin, you're going to be dead in the presence of God. Look over there at that tabernacle. We're going to study the tabernacle pretty soon. All right? No hand shall touch him, it says. He shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they shall come to the Ha-Hor, the mountain. Okay? Verse number 14, very important. So Moses went down from the mountain to the people and consecrated the people, and they baptized their garments. And he said to the people, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman. Boy, there you go, Brother Bill. Get away from them women.
Vacation.
Yeah. Number 16. So it came about on the third day, when it was morning, that there was sounds. Sounds. That's what it means, sounds. What's it say there in your text? Does it say anything to that?
It says, and it came to pass on the third day when the mornings had come, that there was thunderings and lightnings and a heavy cloud upon the mountain.
Okay, there was sounds, great sounds. And there was lightning flashes. And a thick cloud was immersed over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet sound, so that all the people were in the camp, that kept on being the camp, that they were trembling in their sandals. Scared to death. They heard the voice of God, some of them said. The voice of God. They heard the voice of God. And then others, rabbis, say that it was thousands of angels blowing on golden trumpets. They were afraid, scared to death. And already he told them, don't you let an animal touch this mountain. You set up barriers. I'm going to tell you something. You can't come into the presence of God, and the presence of God, look over here at the tabernacle. This tabernacle right here shows the mind of God. This is the plan of salvation, but it also shows the holiness of God. And you go over here, here's a holy place, and here's the Holy of Holies. What is that Holy of Holies a type of? What is it a type of? Huh? Heaven itself. Just think about that for a while. It's a type of heaven itself. There was a veil, but by the way, now this is jumping ahead here. How big was that Holy of Holies? How big is it? What size was it?
150 by 75, I think.
No.
Much littler.
Huh? How big was that Holy of Holies? Just the Holy of Holies. I'm not talking about the whole tabernacle. The Holy of Holies.
15 by 15.
10 by 10.
Huh?
15 by 15.
15 by 15 feet. And that was holy because there's where God dwelled. And there was a veil in front of it. And on that veil was embroidered angels. The angels that stood over the Ark of the Covenant. Now, only one person could go in there and do that. Was when they got ready to move the tabernacle. They couldn't touch that Ark of the Covenant or anything. There were certain people that moved the Ark of the Covenant. We're going to study that a little bit later on. But that mountain was like that Holy of Holies right there. Everything that is in the Old Testament is teaching us something today. God is holy. Do not use His name in vain. Israel wouldn't even speak the name of God after this. After they heard it scared them so bad that they were afraid to even speak His name. And it said here that they heard this thundering, the great sounds. And the rabbi said this was the voice of God or the voice of hundreds of archangels or angels sounding on great trumpets, golden trumpets, lightning flashes, and they were scared to death. And Moses brought the people out to the camp to meet God and stood at the foot of the mountain. They stood right before the Holy of Holies. All right? Only a high priest could go in there. It would cost everybody else their lives if they walked there. The veil. The veil stood for what in the temple and in the tabernacle? What did the veil stand for?
The cross.
No.
Separation.
Huh?
Separation.
No. John 1:14. John 1:14. Brother Mike. Brother Mike.
Kaiho Logos Sarx Aganeto.
Oh, Kaiho Logos Sarx Aganeto. That's Hebrew. I mean, that's the Greek for it. And the Jehovah, flesh, he became. That veil. Into that veil, the veil stood for flesh. Can you see God, even as a saved person, in your flesh?
No.
No. What's going to happen before you see God, before you go into heaven? You have to shed your flesh. You got to die before you can go to heaven. Because you cannot, unless you have the rapture in the meanwhile. That'd be nice. And I tell you what, the way things are looking right now, we're getting awfully close.
I'm praying about it.
You ready, huh?
We're getting awfully close, people.
Get ready. I'm packing my bag.
This is a scary situation we're in, the scary world right now. The flesh, the veil stood for Christ's flesh. What happened at the temple veil when Jesus died?
That was rent.
From top to bottom.
We were right into the presence of God. The veil of his flesh. That's what it says in the Bible. When he died for us. So we have access into heaven. Think about that. How many of you ever heard of that before? Anybody? The veil of the flesh. All right. We can't get in the presence of God without dying. Anybody that touched that mountain beyond those barriers, beyond that veil that God stood behind in the Holy of Holies, and that mountain was like the Holy of Holies now, they died. They died. Let's go on a little bit further now. These sounds were scaring them to death. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke because Jehovah, is that what it says there? Mm-hmm. The Jehovah descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace. And the whole mountain was in a constant earthquake. Seismic activity, seismos in Greek. It quaked, trembled constantly. How many of you have been in an earthquake? I asked people in California. I could ask people in Texas how many have been in an earthquake, and they'd say, But in California, you ask people, how many of you have been in an earthquake? Everybody's hand goes up, unless you just got here. And to hang around for a few weeks, you'll have one.
Didn't you, Tim, I'm thinking either I seen on television or you showed us a film here, but this mountain is still black over there on the top today, isn't it?
People say it is, and it's all marked off where it is. You know, there's fences around, no access to it.
I think one of the deals that you showed a picture of it, and it's completely black on top.
Well, anyway, that's a long time ago. This is 3,500 years ago, people. All right? Now we have a text that's within 500 years, and maybe even some of the Dead Sea Scrolls are with a certain amount of time of that. Verse number 19. Number 19. Look at this one. I wish we had an Amplified Bible here. That'd be really good. Brother Luis.
As oft as the sound of a horn went on, it became exceedingly loud. Moses spake, and Elohim responded to him with a voice.
All right. When the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder and louder and louder, that's the Hebrew for it, louder and louder and louder. The sound of the trumpet just kept getting louder. Can you imagine what these people down there? Now they're sitting on the other side of the fence, which typifies the veil. Okay? They're getting scared by the minute. It's Sister Andina.
In his Bible it says Elohim, that means that God the Father, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus were there?
All the triune God. Elohim is the triune God. Who was on the cross of Calvary? The triune God. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit tasted death for us. The veil of his flesh was being severed, ripped, torn. give us access right into the Holy of Holies. Number 20. And the Lord, read that one, Brother Luis.
Then came Jehovah down on Mount Sinai unto the top of the mount. And Jehovah called Moses onto the top of the mountain, and Moses went up.
All right, now Moses goes up there. He's the high priest. He's our high priest. And who did he stand for? Who did Moses stand for being our high priest at that moment when he had access to heaven itself? Jesus. Jesus took the real offering. All the other offerings stood for. They were a type of what the real offering would be when he took his own offering into the superior sacrifice right into the throne of God. What was the Ark of the Covenant? What was the mercy seat? The kafar. The kafar. The hilasterion, or hilasmos in Greek. What was that? That's the very throne of God. The Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, is the very throne of God in the heaven of heaven. All right? And 21, and then Moses spoke down to the people, go down and warn the people, lest they break through to gaze. How many times you've been going down the road and all of a sudden the traffic just stops. On your side of the freeway, there's nothing going on, but on the other side, the people are looking over there. Gazing. Looking. Rubberneck. Like this. Look at it. 22. And also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, that the Lord break out against them. This is a scary verse or chapter in the Bible here, people. This was scared to death. This chapter right here is the one where they wouldn't even use the name of God. This scared them so bad. They were afraid to even speak His name. So also let the priests who come near to the Lord consecrate themselves, lest the Lord break out against them. In verse number 23, Rebecca.
And Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for you warned us, saying, set bounds around the mountain and sanctify it.
What's Mount Sinai now is a type of the Holy of Holies, heaven itself, because God dwells there on that mountain. Okay? Number 24. Number 24, Brother John.
And the Lord said to him, away, get down, and then come up, you and Aaron with you. But do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and spoke to them.
All right. So he went down and he warned them, didn't he? All right. He went down and he warned them. And chapter number 20. Here we're going to have the 10 Commandments of God. We're going to find out what this is, the 10 Commandments of God. The 10 words, as the Hebrews call it, the 10 words. All right? And then verse number 1 in chapter 20, Brother Louise.
And Elohim spake all these words, saying, I am Jehovah, thy Elohim, who have brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of servants. Thou shalt not have other deities beside me.
All right. God spoke all these words saying, I am the Lord, I am Jehovah, your Elohim. Now everybody's got an Elohim. Every people in the world have an Elohim. Yes.
Can you turn the air off?
Oh, can you turn that air conditioner down, Marilyn?
If everyone else is up there.
They're freezing out here. Thank you. I am Jehovah, your Elohim. Only Israel has a Jehovah. That's the covenant God. The one who shall become. All right? Who brought you out of the land of Egypt. The land in Egypt stands for what? The world. Out of the house of what? Slavery. How many of you, when you were lost sinners, we're saved sinners now, how many of you who were lost sinners were enslaved to the sins of this world? You didn't know that. You were slaves to the sins of this world. You were enslaved. You were captives. And God set you free. That's what it's talking about. You shall have no other Elohims before me. Not in my presence. Get them away from me. That's number 1. You shall not make for yourselves a what? An idol. That's a form, an image. Who is the only image of God that we are ever to worship? God the Son. And not in an image either. Not in an image of Him, only Him as He is the image of God. All right? Not a likeness of Him, or any likeness of what is in heaven, above, or upon the earth, or beneath, or in the water, or under the earth. People in Egypt had worshipped every one of these things. They worshipped bugs, they worshipped fish, they worshipped crocodiles, they worshipped all kinds of birds, whatever. Number 5. Look at this one, Brother Jeff. (20) and verse 5.
You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me.
All right, look at that. All right. 20 and verse number 5 is where we're going to finish. Okay, 20 and verse number 5. And we're going to get into this more next week. And then we're going to get into the study of the tabernacle. I'm so excited about that, I just can't hardly wait. That's why I opened the door just a little bit in there. But we're going to study that tabernacle, and I'm going to try to get some more syllabuses so we can, I'm going to get our church to print some of these for us. And by the way, we're on page 45 in your syllabus. And what? Oh, clicking. We're on page number 45 in your book, I believe. And verse number 26, God's provision. The children of Israel complained about the food and even wanted to go back to Egypt. We studied about that. And what did God give them? Manna and quail. Okay? That's number 26. Number 27, after meeting his father-in-law, who? Jethro. He is also called Rule. He had how many names altogether? How many names? 5 names. Okay, 5 names. And Jethro made a suggestion to Moses. What was the suggestion? That Moses appoint the 70 men. Okay. And this would become what? The Sanhedrin. That's where it would come from. Number 28. After how many months? They reached Mount Sinai. 3 months. They reached Mount Sinai. All right. Mount Sinai. And then number 29, after calling Moses into the mountain, what promise did God make to the children of Israel? And what was the condition placed upon it? He said that if the people would obey him and serve him, he would make them a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Does that sound like what it says in the book of Revelation also? Mm-hmm. Kings and priests. All right. Number 30. What purpose was the law given? What purpose was the law given? To scare the daylights out of them. What was it for? It wasn't the Savior, was it? All right? But it was to lead them to a Savior and to the substitutes for their sins. All right. Number 31, and that's where we are right now, briefly describe the giving of the 10 Commandments. What happened on that mountain? They heard the voice of God. It was in constant seismic activity, earthquakes, all right? And a great cloud came down, and the people feared and ran back, and God set some boundaries, didn't he? He said, this is a type of heaven. They were going to have up on that mountain, God was going to reveal to Moses the pattern of the tabernacle, and they needed to learn respect for God. And then he gave them the 10 Commandments. The commandments, his commandments, on tables of stone. Tables of stone. Well, there's where we're going to start next week. So we've got up there, and then we'll finish out this. We'll talk a little bit more about the law and David. As you're coming up here, I want to have a special prayer today